other people be joining throughout the morning and the rest of the day. But first of all, to say welcome to everyone to our 2025 virtual conference, a conference that we started, PPMA, in the pandemic, and it stuck. And I think it's a worthwhile point in the year to do our virtual conference as we move into autumn and the remainder of the calendar year. So it's a big G up for everyone who's been able to register this morning. And it's really good to have you all here. I'm Pam Parks. I'm president of PPMA in its wonderful 50th year. Which is really, really cool. And in my day job, I'm also a commissioner at Birmingham City Council and envoy at Tower Hamlets. But today, I'm all president for PPMA. I'm very happy to kick off the welcome at our conference, virtual conference this year. I think for me, the virtual conference is an opportunity to do quite a few things, and I'm hoping you'll be able to do at least one or two of these things throughout the day, or if not all of them. I think it's an opportunity for you to pause and reflect, and for you not to feel guilty about doing that. Time invested in taking a little bit of time out to pause and reflect is always a good thing, I think, for us as in our profession. It's also an opportunity for you to consolidate and reinforce your learning over the last 6 months since our face-to-face conference. I think that's a really good thing for you to do. That consolidation and reinforcement of your learning is an important part of your continuous professional development. You may even have an opportunity to reposition your priorities for your organization and business after this conference when you've heard from some of our speakers, and an opportunity to reflect back on sessions today. And I think that's quite important as well, because repositioning is a good thing if you need to. That readjustment throughout the year is a really good thing. But most important, I think, hopefully it will plant a few seeds about what you might want to explore further in some of the subjects that we will cover throughout the day. We've got a very carefully curated agenda. So this morning, we'll be speaking with Matt Burney of Indeed, and talking about the shift in AI and us preparing for the future of work. Then after Matt, we've got our AGM, our annual general meeting in our 50th year. We're going to do a little bit of reflection over the last year and something about looking forward. And there are changes happening for PPMA, so we'll cover that in that session. And then we'll have a session with Solace, one of our strategic partners. We'll have a session on local government reform and update, and I think that's very important for all of you and those of you yet to go through local government reform to have an update around where we're at as a sector. And then before lunch, we'll have a session from the wonderful Owen Mapley from SIPFA, who will be talking to us about public sector finances and the priorities going forward for local government. After lunch, we'll be covering AI again in terms of how it's helping public sector tackle recruitment challenges. We'll have a session on transformation, something very dear to my heart in terms of how the HR and OD professionals should be leaning further into transformation in our organisation. And then we end the day celebrating excellence, our wonderful HR and OD Team of the Year and overall gold winners from North Yorkshire Council will be talking to us about their journey. So we have got, I think, a really, really good agenda for our members in this virtual conference. Really, some really important information. Remember, there is lots happening in the sector at the moment. We've got local elections coming up next year. We've got the Employment Rights Bill coming down the track really, really quickly. And we've got a lot of work to do in terms of local government reform and transformation. So I really, really do hope that you enjoy the session. I know that some of you may be staying for all of it, and some of you may be dipping in, but wherever you, whether you're staying for all of it or dipping in, try and make the most of it. It is really all about you. It's an important opportunity for you to take as much as you can out of this conference, which we've carefully curated for you, and I hope that you will enjoy. Ask as many questions as you want to. You'll have an opportunity at the end of each of the sessions for questions and answers. The PPMA board members are all here and will be involved in the AGM Q&A. So this is a real opportunity for you to ask any questions that you can. Ask questions of all of our session leaders. It's important for you to, get those questions out. The questions that you may think are really, really not stupid, but simple, actually maybe being thought of by other people wanting to ask those same said questions. So don't feel shy, don't be bashful, ask questions. It's really important and it helps with the learning. Interactive as much as you can. So there you go. I'm now going to pass on to the wonderful Indeed for our session for AI, and let's hear from Matt.
Thanks a lot, Pam. Good morning, everybody. Really lovely to be joining you today. I'm very privileged to be a speaker at this event. So thank you all for having me. And it's nice to see that there's a few names that I've seen on the screen and a couple of faces that I've met before. So to those of you that I've met before, hello again. To those that I've not met, my name's Matt Burney. I'm a senior strategic advisor at Indeed, which is a very grand job title, which essentially means that I spend a lot of time working on thought leadership pieces around what the future of work looks like, whether that's through technology, people transformation, skills transformation, or indeed the world of economics, which I think is a really important part of what we do within the world of talent and recruitment. So I cover a lot of ground and I spend a lot of time speaking at events and speaking with some of the largest employers in the world. So I'm very privileged to get a bit of a backstage window on what's going on, not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector. We've done quite a lot of government work recently and worked with various NHS trusts, local authorities, and actually with government itself. So we've had a fairly unique perspective on what's going on in the world of work. And I think I wanted to share with you today some stuff about the kind of change that we're seeing and some of the challenges that change is bringing, because though we do see a bit of a rush headlong into we must all adopt AI and technology and automation, and I do think that is a good and positive thing. I'm a huge advocate of using AI in the workplace, particularly in the world of talent attraction and talent selection, because I think there's a lot of efficiency that we can have there. The flip side of that is that we need to be cautious around what we do and make sure that we do the right pieces of work at the right time and for the right reasons. Because if we do things wrong, we risk alienating people and we risk not creating benefit in the broader term. So what we've done very, very recently, and when I say recently, this is about as recent as we can get in terms of surveys that we've done. We actually looked at running a survey earlier this year, which was in time for our event in May. So from the 9th to the 23rd of April this year, we interviewed just under 2,000 employees across a really broad cross-section of organisations, from local government through to enterprise businesses, right the way down to small businesses. And within that, we identified nearly 1,000 senior leaders, so we could get a real picture of what senior leaders were thinking. And also we looked at those people who are HR decision makers. So we've really got a good, strong cross-section here, so we could truly understand what we're doing. We did that in partnership with YouGov, and it revealed to us some surprising and I think probably sobering insights into what's going on from the point of view of workplace change. There's a kind of quiet, powerful divide that's starting to exist in some organizations. And it's a result of how we manage change and how we help people navigate the management of that change. So what I really want to talk to you today about is that growing gap that we've seen and we can evidence quite well between leaders and employees, the kind of thing that's emerging really quite rapidly in conjunction with what's going on from the rapid change in innovation. I think as we continue to innovate and as we continue to put new technology into the workplace, we do risk at times losing things like unity and shared direction. And I think that's incredibly important, whether we're in the public or the private sector. We do have a sense of unity when we come to work. Work is where we spend, for most of us, the majority of our lives, believe it or not. We probably spend more time at work than we do with our family. There's lots of data and research behind that. And most people I know have actually met either their best friend through work or some of their closest friends through work. So unity and shared direction are really, really important things for us as humans and as workers. So I think our goal really should be to reunite leaders and reunite teams, reunite strategy and execution, and really think about purpose and productivity. Because there is a really big opportunity right now for us to do considerably better than we've perhaps done in the past with the use and adoption of new technology. Now, I'm sure people will have heard a lot about job displacement and automation. This very, very widely cited figure from the Institute of Public Policy Research suggests that up to 8 million UK jobs could be at risk from automation in the years ahead. In fact, the true wording around this is by the end of 2025. Now, we've seen this in countless newspapers and do people still read newspapers? I think some do. But we've certainly seen this online. We've seen it on news outlets. Lots and lots of people have put this out there saying that there's going to be 8 million jobs lost in the UK. This is a disaster. It's going to be something terrible. Well, actually, this is one of 4 scenarios that the IPPR put out. It is the bleakest and the worst, absolutely. But if you look at all of the other studies that have been done and you look at the other government research that sits out there, they vary wildly, 8 million being the absolute worst case scenario. But realistically, and government has very recently put out some data around this, they do suggest that something in the order of about 18% of UK jobs are currently at risk of significant change. So though 18%, the grand scheme of things seems a little bit small, it's really significant for us in the job market. It means that there are going to be some fundamental changes that are going to go on. Chiefly when we look at where those changes are going to happen, they tend to be in things that are administrative driven roles, which is why we kind of talk about this in the world of talent quite a lot, because where we are right now is not where we're going to be in very short order. If we think about the change that we've already seen through the adoption of new technology, what we were doing with things like AI tools today is probably fundamentally different to what we did 2 years ago. If you look at something like ChatGPT, which is arguably one of the most widely used tools out there, you will see that ChatGPT from ChatGPT 3 to where we are now at GPT 5 are 2 entirely different products. There's also that problem of the product that people pay for. So if they've got the disposable income to spend $20 a month, I think it is, you'll see that product is very different to the free one. So we need to understand that there's a lot of change going on here, but also understand that crucially that these numbers are not a forecast, they're a scenario. And when we look at these extremes, they are quite scary, but they are conditional on inaction. So what we kind of wind up with a lot of the time is people kind of thinking it's going to be like this, that we're going to wind up with the Terminators ganging up on us and it's all going to be horrible. But the future of work doesn't have to be a crisis. It's more about opportunity, because for all the scare stories around automation, it's possible for technology to support and empower human beings to do better work, to do more fulfilling work. And in some instances, let's face it, a little less work, which I think we would all probably welcome quite a bit. So making tomorrow's world a better one requires organizations and leaders to plan. So that's one of my key messages for today. What we see at the moment is probably a scenario that looks something like this. Yes, it's a ChatGPT image. Yes, his face looks a bit weird. But if we look at what's going on here, this is probably the scenario lots of people find themselves in. They've got new technology, whether that is an AI tool or purely a piece of automation, it is there and it's sitting alongside them. And people are a little bit worried about that. We're going to see people there saying, well, do I need to adopt this? Do I want to adopt this? And we as organizational leaders need to be thinking about what that change means to people. We don't want this scenario. We don't want people to sit there and feel like there is some big monolithic piece of technology that is going to fundamentally change their days and the way that they work. What we need people to do is not be scared. We actually want to bring them along that journey so that they're having a really good experience. Oftentimes we've got leaders focusing in on automation, AI, transformation, whether it's private or public sector. I've had lots of conversations with people who say, yes, we want to do big transformational change. We've seen that in various government departments recently. And in some instances, it's gone incredibly well. And we've got the leaders that are kind of focusing on that. But unfortunately, a lot of employees are dealing with unclear goals, high stress, and change that can feel a little bit imposed on people. And that's what we want to avoid, because that's where you're going to wind up with longer term challenges. You're going to wind up with retention issues, and you're going to wind up with people who don't want to adopt the technology that is fundamental to the success of the organization that they're in. When we look at this specifically and we look in the public sector, we can look at the importance of change to clearly see that disconnect that may exist within the public sector. So if you look on here, this is specifically looking within the public sector, how important is AI to your organization currently? And we can see that in employees, we're only down about 40% in terms of feeling it's important, 50% feeling it's unimportant. If we flip that around and we go and look at senior managers are saying it's significantly more important. So 60% versus 40%. That is showing a very, very big disconnect. The other problem that we see in here is that HR is definitely not in the same world as senior leaders. So though we may be looking at change being implemented from a very top-down point of view, there's a clear message here within the public sector that conversation from senior leaders needs to trickle down to those people in functional roles, but also in the roles where people are going to be responsible for integrating and making sure people have that kind of rollout. Now, interestingly, if we ask people how supported they feel in their ability to see and implement change, whether this is public or private sector, the numbers are strangely similar. So if we look at the importance level here, we can see employees are at 40%, senior manager at 60%. Weirdly, that is reflected again in whether people feel they are supported in their ability to make change. This is across all organizations. So in aggregate, that's about 3,000 people in this survey. 60% of senior leaders say they feel supported and able to make change. Only 40% of employees feel that. That 20% gap isn't resistance. I think it's a very natural response to disconnection between what's going on and the true reality of doing your job. We also look at preparedness. Most senior managers feel prepared, and actually a lot of employees say they feel prepared, but prepared and supported are not mutually exclusive. As we've seen before, people don't necessarily feel supported in their ability to make that change. So we really do need to start working on ensuring that people understand what we're trying to do and not enforcing things that result in a problem. And that problem typically looks the same. We see the kind of very subtle erosion of energy, erosion of loyalty, and we used to call this burnout. And I think burnout it's got some odd connotations. There's a fantastic author called Sarah Leverett, who I do a lot of work with. She works with the League Managers Association She's coached England teams on psychology as well. She's written some fantastic books, and she talks a lot about this as not being burnout, as being rust out. That kind of erosion of loyalty and trust feels a little bit more like you're rusting out the bottom of something, and people kind of care less about it because they've been given an increased workload and increased, an imbalance with their work-life balance. Increased workload is a really interesting thing right now. Lots and lots of times I'm going into organizations who are saying, yes, we've put in a load of AI tools. In fact, I had a conversation with my boss earlier on this week. He won't mind me saying, honestly. But we were having a conversation about a new AI process that we wanted to put together. And he was suggesting the ways that we could go and do that and the tools that we would need to implement, the ways that we'd need to do it. And I pointed out that we were about a week into this process and it's going to take another week for us to do it. Whereas actually, if we'd have just done the work in the first place, it would have probably taken us 2 days. And that's the kind of thing that we really have to be aware of, that we can create additional workload for people just because we've not necessarily thought through the process. And if we're workers, what do we really want? We want clarity, we want security, we want inclusion. We don't necessarily want perfection. Leaders are really prioritizing things like skills and the skills growth that employees have. Employees are really prioritizing pay and job security at the moment. If you are not aware of the Indeed Hiring Lab, we produce reports every month on what's going on for the world of employees, what employees think about work, but also what employers think. And we can very, very clearly see from the data that we have there and from the survey data that employers are increasingly saying, we want to prioritize skills. We want to make sure that people are getting more and more out of that. Whereas we know because there is pressure on the pay packet that everybody's got and increasing uncertainty about jobs, job security and pay are the things that people really, really need at the moment. And that's not resistance to change, but it's kind of lack of context and involvement that's probably leading to some of that. So if we are going to upskill people, we are going to bring people along this journey, we need to be very clear about why we're doing that and also articulate to them that, it doesn't impact their job security. Again, when we look at this support thing, I think it's a problem that leadership thinks it's communicating really well, but employees can feel disconnected. So if only 40% of employees feel supported, that means that our communication needs to be clearer, more relevant, more human. And leadership is about translating that strategy into true meaning. When we look at things like AI specifically, senior leaders use AI way more than employees. In fact, most employees in our survey data actually said they only use AI probably once a week. That's a really interesting piece of data. And it's kind of borne out by the fact that a lot of companies have actually put in AI processes. A lot of organizations have done that. But they've also created a walled garden and they're not allowing people to go and do everything that they would want to do on there. There is increasing growth in what's kind of known as I think they call it the shadow economy of AI. I read an article about it just yesterday. But what we're increasingly seeing is people not using the AI tools that they're given at work because they're more comfortable using their own iteration of ChatGPT or other things. So though we may see senior leaders actually using the tools they've been given, lots of people are more comfortable with using their own version of that. So that's a big problem. The sentiment is really mixed around what's going on here. There are massive productivity gains, but there are job security concerns that are going on here. So that's a trust gap, not just a skills gap. So again, we really need to make sure that if we are doing these things, we're going in the right direction together. And if we look at AI adoption versus what people are saying about importance, there's a clear problem brewing within the public sector. So again, this is public sector specific data. As you can see, does your organization currently use AI in any capacity? And it's predominantly somewhat or no. So we know that this is coming down the pipe a little bit. And the only the smallest area of that is extensively. So I only know a very few number of public sector organizations that have made that change, HMRC being a really, really great example of that. The work that's been done over there has been fantastic. I know there are various other departments that are doing the same kind of work and working with the HMRC team to go and develop that kind of AI tool out even further. But there is that disconnect that's happening. So I do think when we're talking to the public sector, we should be trying to encourage the use of technology, but also probably allowing people to understand where they already use it. Certainly, if you're a customer of Indeed, and I know many of you will be, you are already using AI in your recruitment process. It's just not overly visible. If you use something like LinkedIn, you will also see the same thing. You'll be using AI tools, but they're very much in the background. When you use things like applicant tracking systems, or even if you're users of things like Microsoft 360 and you've probably got Copilot on there somewhere, you are using those tools. So I think an understanding gap might be some of the challenge there. But again, that comes down to communication. We do know that when we see AI being used, and we're seeing it used a lot in the world of recruitment for things like CV screening, chatbots, the comms process right the way through onboarding, really, really great examples of how you can use AI technology really effectively. 90% of the companies that do use AI in their processes are saying that it improves that process, but most have not actually fully embedded AI into their process. So though we are talking about this as being something that is really prevalent, it's not as prevalent as you might think. So you can have challenges there, but when we think about the benefits, we do tangibly know what we can do. Within the world of talent, for example, we've done extensive research around this, as has the Harvard Business Review. I'm trying to think who else did it. McKinsey did a large project. Josh Berson's done a big project around this. We've all come out with the same thing, that within the world of talent attraction, we know it's between 14 and 14 and a half hours a week are wasted on manual processes. So those processes where you're having to write something out, you're moving somebody manually around a computer process, all of those things are the things that you can automate away. Government research that came out about 2 months ago suggested it was about 10 hours a week for all employees that could be automated away already. So if we look at that from the TA perspective, that's 35% of your working week that we can help you automate. Now, to some, that's going to seem really, really scary because that sounds like I'm going to automate away your job. In reality, what we're talking about here is we're freeing you up to go and do what you were hired to do. Particularly if you work in recruiting and talent, we hired people because they're great communicators. They're really good at stakeholder management. They're really great at connecting with candidates. And that's the skill set that we want people to have. And that's why we hire those people. It's really, really challenging to have those people who came in really inspired to do a job, and they had purpose and they really wanted to come and do that job, but found themselves doing administrative burden. If we can get away with that, we give people back purpose, we give them the right kind of transparency. We can really do that if we do it with trust, training, and intent. And I think training is a really big challenge. Many of you may already know, we have some of the highest rates of digital illiteracy in the developed world. In fact, we rank 23rd out of 27 countries, which is really, really quite shocking. I was quite surprised when I found it. Investment in training is really, really low as well. The lowest level of adult learning is actually in Europe, in the UK rather, versus Europe. Skills are really, really important. People need digital literacy. They need to learn adaptability. And actually, one of the core skills that we need people to learn at the moment is clear communication. The ILO put out some research at the beginning of this year looking at the skills that people need the most. Very top of those was communication and critical thinking. So I think we should really, really be focusing in on that and making sure that we're giving people the right opportunities and the right skills. Skills are a part of infrastructure. They're not a side project within HR. And I think Personally, I think they're part of national infrastructure and we should be treating it that kind of way. Because if workloads are rising and meaning is declining, people are going to lose a degree of purpose. People do more, but they feel less impact. Purpose really drives engagement, retention, and resilience. So we need to think about anchoring the work that we're doing in meaning. So we can give people lots of opportunity and lots of training, but it's got to be paired with true meaning and a true idea of where we're going with this. I get that we have lots and lots of things going on, and some other business functions have modernized way, way faster than HR. You look at things like product and marketing and sales and things like that. They have all run away and done lots and lots of stuff with AI, but we've kind of modernized at a different pace, and public sectors are modernized at a different pace as well. But there are real barriers against the kind of change that we're trying to put in here. Economic uncertainty is a real problem for all of us. Do we want to invest in something when we don't really understand what that growth is going to look like or what change is going to look like? The eternal mantra of do more with less. I think I've been in this industry for 26 years now, and I've heard the same mantra every year. It doesn't really go away, but we do still have under-resourced teams and arguably some poor communication that leads to us not getting what we need. So we need to be thinking about ourselves as a strategic engine, not as a support role. When we do that, we should really reflect values, not just automate tasks. So if we are putting in AI and automation, that's what we're doing. We're reflecting the true values of who we are. We should shift from very kind of basic, old, outdated processes to things like capabilities and realigning education, giving more speed, more insight, and less bias to the processes that we have. And look, as I said before, let's be absolutely honest here. If we're talking about the world of recruiting, there's lots and lots of talk about this in the world. But actually, of the surveys that we carried out, only 43% of the companies were using AI in their recruitment process. If you look at what's gone on from an HR leadership point of view, last year, 91% of HR managers said they intended to put AI into their processes by the end of this year. That was last year. The same survey was run this year, and it's 81% said they're going to do it this year. So realistically, even by the survey data that's been done, the big HR surveys that have been done out there, we know that only 10% of people who intended to do something actually did it. So much as we talk about all this sort of stuff, the reality is it's perhaps not moving as rapidly as people would like you to believe. So we can take a degree of caution and make sure that we're doing it the right way in the first place. I do think the tools exist, but the strategy and readiness are sometimes lacking. But I think we need to remember what this really looks like at the moment. A lot of organizations are stuck in using AI and automation for administrative purposes. So those things that we've already talked about. They're stuck in this kind of piece around drudgery. Strategic value lies in using AI and automation for performance, prediction, and fairness. I think those are the key areas that we can really work on. The problem isn't tech, it's kind of systems and cultural readiness, because the technology is there. And yes, we should be doing that drudgery piece. Absolutely, we should be trying to automate those things that we know we can automate. Absolutely, we should do that. But if we spend too much time thinking about that and not enough time looking at this transformational change, we're not going to make the shift from convenience to competitive advantage. And I know that's kind of strange wording to use a little bit when we talk about public sector, but at the end of the day, we are still in a competitive market, regardless of where we work. And competitive advantage, I think, is important. We need to show and prove value to our stakeholders. So in all, I think people want transparency, not perfection. Lack of clarity leads to fear and disengagement, and communication needs to be ongoing, honest, and conversational. So our vision must really live in dialogue, not just in PowerPoint. And for those of you that have ever seen me present before, you will have definitely seen me put this slide up. but it's my favorite quote because I do think this is fundamentally important. Stop defending outdated systems just because they're familiar. Transformation means building the new with intent, with inclusion, and AI should be there to serve people, not just process. So it's a bit of a call, I think, to lead not just a change, but to lead that change and really think about those elements that you can put in there. There are other things I think we should be talking about in terms of alignment between brand and reality. We all have a brand, and we do need to talk about our culture and our brand because it helps build belonging, and belonging builds loyalty, as I've talked about before. That is more of a cultural issue, and culture is a retention strategy. We also need to accept that in all of this, uniformity and certainty are kind of going out the window a little bit because change is very, very rapidly coming. So we need to think about how do we align better and offer more clarity. So in conclusion, I would say lead with clarity, move with purpose, and most of all, make sure that you include people in the changes that you're putting out there. If you'd like any more information about the report that we've done, and I will share a copy of this deck with the group today, but you can download the reports on that link there. Probably should have given you a quick QR code or something, shouldn't I? But kind of failed on that one. But the report is really, really extensive. There is a public sector specific version of that as well, if you just like the public sector data split out. We've done a lot of work around this. The research that we covered here took us an awful long time to put together the right questions for it and understand what that means. As I said, that was done in conjunction with YouGov. So hopefully that's of use to you. And overall, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's really great to have the opportunity to talk to a group like yourselves. And I think we've got a little time for questions.
Thank you, Matt. That was fantastic. Really, really, really was. And we missed out on you on our face-to-face conference because unfortunately you had an accident and so you couldn't make that session. So we're so pleased that you could bring us the session at the virtual conference. It was wonderful. I have made so many notes, but I'm really clear about the YouGov information that talked about what people are seeking is the clarity, the security, and inclusion. I think that is really, really, really key. I'd like to know a little bit more about the walled garden because I've put something in the post around how local government operates. And I like the idea you ended in terms of performance prediction and fairness, things that I think we as HR lean into. That was a really
Has Pam just frozen for me, or is it
No,
everybody?
it's just frozen for everyone. Okay. Well, Matt, actually, while Pam's while Pam's in the background, I'll ask a quick question. I thought the point you made about AI can be utilised for predictions more and just trying to help rather than just processing. It's a good point, interesting point. But it also goes back to the point I think that we've talked about with any systems, it's that old sort of garbage in, garbage out type thing. Unless you know what you're, unless you've got a way of monitoring or assessing outcomes in the right way, it's just going to churn out a load of rubbish, isn't it? So it's ensuring that you've got the right, you're capturing the right kind of things and right kind of information for it to be able to analyze and help identify what the benefits might be before you can so you can utilize it properly. And too many people don't do that sort of outcome analysis in terms of what it is that they're trying to achieve. They just bung a load of information in and hopefully it will give them the answer, but that's not necessarily the way forward.
Yeah, I think there's some really.
I'm back.
Ah, you're back, Pam. Excellent.
Don't know. Well, typical, isn't it, of technology? I was kicked out for some reason.
Ah,
Sorry about that.
no worries, no worries. Yeah, Steve, just on that point, the kind of garbage in, garbage out thing. Yes, I think there is a certain solid core of truth in that. when we look at how people use most AI tools, there's a degree of trepidation about how to use it. And I think the kind of knee jerk a lot of people will do is I'll just put something in and ask a really simple question to go and get an answer. Yes, that's kind of valid in some ways, but one of the things that I do see lots and lots of people talking about is, and this is a good example to kind of boil down what you're talking about, Steve, is when we look at CVs, the amount of CVs that people are getting in, lots of people are saying, oh God, I'm getting thousands of CVs and they're all AI generated in the world of recruiting. Yes, but also you have to realize there's double the number of people that are actually actively looking for jobs at the moment anyway. So yes, you may be seeing more CVs, but the market has changed. And I don't think people are taking that into account as much. But what I do see happening is that people have zero experience. So I've never had a job before. I'm straight out of college, school, university, whatever it is. I've never had a job before and I don't really have any experience. And they go straight to something like ChatGPT and say, could you write me a CV? And if they've got the free version and they've got no experience, it's going to do the same thing almost every time. And as employers, I think everybody needs to get better at telling people how to do that better themselves, how to be better at writing, decent CVs, at putting together content that is really going to be stand out to an employer. The same thing goes with, and I'm sure we've all seen it, and I won't, no fingers being pointed here. It's a bit like the friend of yours that has never written an essay in their life, who is now posting on LinkedIn every week, and is now some sort of thought leader. We've all seen lots and lots of people do that. You can always tell because they've left the emojis and the EM dashes in everywhere. But it's one of those things that people do it because it's easy, and convenience is an important thing. But you've got to do it for the right reasons. Being intentional is massively important, Steve. You're absolutely right.
Back to Pam, I think, and let her finish her question.
Oh, you're on mute, Pam.
Taking myself off of mute. Sorry about that. Yes, sorry about being kicked out. My question was on the section of the YouGov survey specific to local authorities. Was there anything in there around ethics? Because that is always something that gets thrown back when we're talking about the use of these technologies with some of our colleagues in the public sector or local government in particular.
Yeah. We didn't survey ethics specifically, but that said, I sit on our AI ethics board at Indeed. I've sat as an ethics advisor to a lot of other companies as well. I think that is kind of the backbone of what we do when we're thinking about the adoption, particularly of artificial intelligence. It's very easy to say, oh, we're just going to go and do something, but you do have to think about the ethical considerations around fairness, bias, inclusion. All of those things are massively, massively important. It's really easy to go and create a problem very, very quickly when you're not thinking about that first. Also, I think when we're thinking about AI, you need to be thinking about what does AI versus responsible AI really mean? And also, you also need to make it explainable. So ethical, responsible, and explainable are kind of the three core things that you should have, particularly in the world of public sector. Let's face it, at the end of the day, you're very, very, very public, and it's very easy to spot problems, and you can't afford to be in that world. So I'm a great believer that if you are going to go down the route of implementing new technology, you kind of need to have those conversations first, because if you're not doing that, you're not necessarily being responsible in the way that you implement technology. That said, I do talk a lot about ethics anyway, Pam, and I do think whenever you're putting any piece of technology in there, there needs to be that discussion being had. An ethics board is an important consideration. It's a really, really big part of what we do.
And I really do think that it's one of our responsibilities as HR and OD professionals to make sure that conversation's being had as part of our thinking around this. I'm not saying it's overlooked, but I do sometimes. I'm in a room and you've got like your procurement, your finance colleagues, and they're looking at the return on investment, but they're not looking at the ethical side to some of these new technologies, and how we make sure that it supports our people, our citizens, not to just ensuring, we want high performance, we want great productivity, we want more efficiency, but we also want to ensure that the ethics part of this is also considered in application.
Yeah.
Any other questions from colleagues? I've lost my chat, so I thought I saw something in the chat in terms of other questions, but people, please come forward and put your hands up. I know that Frank O'Sullivan, who's on the call, had made several comments. Frank, do you want to ask anything?
No, I'm fine. It was just some comments, really. So, Matt, everything you said, I totally agree with. I think we need to take some of the noise out of the system regarding some of this. It's just the next step, and I think we need to remind some of our workforce that actually this is nothing to be scared of. That some of us remember when things were on paper. But look at the transformation we've all not only survived but thrived in, and everybody has these days has a smartphone in their pocket as part of it. And I think sometimes we need to remind people that we've been on the biggest transformation journey, and this is just simply the next step. It's that analogy I think I put in there earlier. That's where I heard and really struck home with me. That AI isn't going to take over your job. The person who does use AI effectively is likely to. And that's probably something we need to start thinking about and changing the conversation with the organization, because it's just another tool, and if we make it something that it ain't, we're in danger of missing the opportunity of maximizing this. Seeing it as everybody getting a promotion, because actually we're finally being able to do the work we were trained and hired to do, because we get rid of all that low level administrative tasks. I use it on an hourly basis. AI, just literally those things. Write me an email. How do you word this? That kind of thing, and it takes absolute hours off. And then we need to trust people. I do get the ethics element of it, but it's no more unethical than actually employing human beings. Same problem as well, as something we have to recognize. So changing the conversation, I think, and giving people some safe sandpits to experiment.
Yeah, I always think it's funny, Frank. A data point I didn't put in that I was going to was if you look at when people or the ability to adopt and adapt to change. I turned 50 this year, so I'm the same age as the PPMA. There you go.
I'm here.
Well, congrats, Frank.
Happy birthday to you too.
But if you look back to the changes that I've experienced at work, I remember my first proper job. This really dating. My first proper job was I was a fax runner. So I was physical email. Somebody sent a fax, I took it off the machine, I literally ran to the person, they put a note on it, I ran back to the fax machine. And when the bank I worked in introduced email, that job disappeared. So I had to go and do something else. And I was one of two people out of a team of 15 that went and found another job within the company. And they only kept, I think, 4 people that was in what was effectively a post room. Remember those? But over time, you had fax to email, then the internet came in, then you got mobile phones, then you got social media, and all of these things happened. And our employers just said, get on with it. And we did. And if you look at the data behind this, those people born before 1980 are the most adaptable to change because they've experienced a lot of it. Something we make big assumptions about is that young people are happy to adapt to change. Not true. Younger people may have already adopted that technology in their personal life. So if you look at how younger people use things like GPT, one of the phrases that I think is fascinating that's died amongst the under 24s is they don't say, I'll Google that, because it's gone. Google isn't the first port of call for them. They use things like GPT as an operating system. They may use that in their personal life, but they don't know how to use that in a work context. So we really do need to make sure that we are training people to experience change and actually understand how to go and use something they have in their personal life and that they can then go and use in their work life in a very different but much more effective way. So some of the assumptions we make about people, we need to make sure we change.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to take it over, but there's a story I tell people when I used to work abroad, and our head office was in London. And we used to get a brown bag every week from a plane, and that was our work for a week. And I remember them introducing emails, and I remember the day I could still. And I said to a colleague, "This ain't going to catch on." Kind of thing. And I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned in my life, that when anything ever comes, do the opposite of what you think, Frank, when it comes to it. Sorry for taking over.
But what you've just epitomized, I think, Frank, is what Matt was saying around leadership, and that leadership is translating the strategy into true meaning. And I think that is something that I've taken from your session. That is part of our role for our organization, is that translation of the strategy into true meaning. And so that work still has purpose, and where people fit in. So, I was glad that you highlighted that, Frank. It is important for us changing the conversation. Any other questions?
Sorry, Samantha Buckley's got her hand up. She's had it up for a while.
Samantha, I can't see everyone's hands, but thank you, Steve. Sorry, Samantha. You're on mute.
You're muted, Samantha.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. It was just an article I saw the other day about AI adoption in different companies, and it was from a CEO that sort of said that when they'd done the kind of planning and working out how they could use it, the main thing that occurred to them is the time for people to actually spend being able to try things out, and not necessarily be afraid of failing, and having that space to try and find those creative solutions to some of the problems within the workplace. And I think that perhaps in local government, we need more time or sessions, or even perhaps an odd day or two, to be able to have these types of workshops to find out, one, what are the main things that take up all of the time within the departments, and then the time to actually be free to learn how to use them to see how they can most effectively work within your particular organisation. But I think without that time to be able to do that, particularly in local government, the day churn takes over. And then, like you say with the example earlier on, you think, well, I'll just do that task rather than building up a process to help you do those tasks, because that takes a lot longer. So it was just really a reflection to say that maybe in smaller organisations, it's easier to allow the people to take the time to then play with these things, to find those creative solutions that much quicker than we can do, perhaps in local government, and perhaps that's the steer we need to stake.
Yeah, I think
added to that, Samantha, is the issue that I think I put into the chat, but I've now lost, around the fact that most of the local government is locked down in terms of allowing for that experimentation. But go ahead, Matt.
There's a really fantastic quote that I will butcher if I try and remember it this morning, but John Cleese spoke a long time ago about the importance of play and how play leads to more effective work. And that sounds like a slightly odd comment in the context of what we're talking about today. But when you look at things like artificial intelligence, more to the point, generative AI, it's really important to actually play with that technology. It's important to find out what works for you. It's important to find out the tone of voice that you want to put out when you're using these kind of tools. And giving people the space and the time to actually do that, I think, is really, really fundamentally important. And indeed, we've done a lot of work around that to actually say to people, look, go and spend an hour or two just going and chatting to your AI tools. Go and learn what they feel like. Does that actually feel like a fit for you? Go and use the internal questioning tools to go and find out how other people have done that. We're very open about the usage that we have here. We've got multiple different channels that we can use. One of them is we use Slack internally as an internal comms tool, and we integrate ChatGPT chatbot into there. So anybody can go and ask GPT a question, and they do it publicly. And the results are there from everything from our software developers through to people in our marketing team. We'll ask questions, have conversations with GPT, and what we'll find is that other people will dive in and say, oh, I've tried that, and this is the way that I solved that problem. And then actually going back to the GPT and saying, great, can you tell me a little bit more about how we can solve that more effectively? So play and collaboration, I think, are hugely important and kind of slightly lost skill that we have in work. We should, at the moment, because we're in a big area of change and flux, give people that space to kind of learn and grow. And that's what is going to help us not have increased division as the result of technology. We'll have more inclusion and more willingness to share if we have the time and the space to do that. So Samantha, I thoroughly agree that we do need to make sure that we're giving people that space.
Wonderful. Look, it's 11. I think we've come to the end of our time on this first session, but what a first session. Thank you so much, Matt. And just imagine if you'd been there in person, we probably would have kept you with loads more questions.
Well, next time around, Pam.
Next time around, yeah. We hope that we can speak to you again. I've gained a lot of insight from this session. It's really, got my juices going again in terms of talking to the people that I'm working with around the use of AI. Thank you for sharing the slides with us. We'll make sure that people will receive them as well. The Good Aid Memoir. It was a fantastic session. So everyone, just give Matt a round of applause.